Hello everyone, I have a question for you. Which is better, the Marder 1A1 or the BMP-2? This is a question that has been floating around in my head ever since Tuesday's update. Now I don't know when I'm going to upload this video. It may be the same day of recording. I'm recording this on Friday, so this may go up this evening or tomorrow. I'm not sure. But I watched Marder 1A1 gameplay, and as you can see here, this is my own gameplay, and I am playing it, obviously. So I've had my hands on it for a couple of days now. This game you're seeing here was actually my last grind game before unlocking the Bagel Jaeger Panzer, whatever the name is. I can't actually remember, but the question I have had in my mind is exactly the one I mentioned at the start of this video. Which is better, the Marder 1A1 or the BMP-2? This is not a question I have found very easy to come up with an answer to, because Wargaming have done such a good job with this line and the way they've balanced it that it's irritating. It's irritating because there are other lines in the game. For example, it's very, very easy for me to tell you that the M3A2 Bradley is better than the M8 AGS. They're both light tanks, they're both in the same line, they're both in the same era, they're both at the same position in the tech tree, but hands down, the Bradley is the better light tank. Fact. It just is. There's no question about it. That is not the case with the Marder 1A1 and the BMP-2. Now, I know, strictly speaking, they're not the same tier. The Marder is tier 2. The that's a nice bit of air there. The Marder is tier 2. The BMP-3 is tier 3. So the BMP-2 is technically higher in the food chain. So it's not an exact comparison, but when you look at their weapon systems, ATGMs and autocannons, both, you find that the play styles are going to be very, very similar. But the question remains, and this is probably something that new players will ask. I'm new to the game. Which one should I grind first? Which one is better? You know, that's a pretty standard, that's a pretty typical question that anybody would ask. So in this video, I'm going to attempt to answer that question. I am probably not going to be definitive because I think the differences between these two are minuscule. So let's get into the meat and the bones of this and try and figure out an answer to this question. Okay, so this is something that I wrote down because this is how I'm trying to make the point. The point that I'm trying to make is that every time a Marder throws up a pro, the BMP-2 has a counter in every single way. So let me just read off what I've written here and we'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. So Marder has higher alpha and pen per shot in its autocannon, but the BMP-2's clip is more than 2.5 times bigger. The Marder has better alpha per ATGM, but the BMP-2 has higher penetration per ATGM. Marder has more hit points, but the Marder's a bigger target, so it's easier to hit. So those hit points are going to be more easily taken away from you. The Marder is faster, but it has worse concealment than the BMP-2. The Marder has higher DPM, but it has terrible depression on the ATGM launcher. So you can see where I'm going with this. Every time the Marder says, "Oh, but I can do this," the BMP-2 comes up and says, "Well, yeah, that's great, but I can do this." And it's like, well, yeah, that is true. So for me, this is a really tough question for me to try and approach. And that's why I say Wargaming have done a very, very good job with balancing this line, because it means that there are pros to playing both lines. There's a reason to play both lines. Whereas previously, when we've had other lines come out, you reach a point where you're like, well, this is just terrible. This tank is just not as good as its counterpart. People would probably argue that playing the M60 line is a lot better than trying to play the Conqueror and the Chieftain line. Era 2, Americans versus the British line. Some people would argue that one's line is just better. But this is very, very different, especially with these two tanks, the BMP-2 and the Marder 1A1. So, if I don't think either one is better than the other, what do I have to say about them? Well, I think it all comes down to your play style, and it all comes down to what you prefer to be playing as a tanker. What is the difference then? Okay, I personally think the BMP-2 is more of a scout, and we've just won that game, and I can't remember if I mentioned already, but that was my last grind game. So finished second, 6,091 damage, a good result, a very good result in the Marder 1A1. 602 assist, and the split between damage and assist is something I'm going to circle back to a little bit later when we get to the end of this game. So this is a BMP-2 game. So I'm giving you, here's the Marder, here's the BMP-2. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at both of them side by side. Right, yes, playstyle. That's what I was talking about. So it all comes down to playstyle. The BMP-2 is slower, but it's got better hull traverse and it's got better concealment. So while it might not be able to get into position as quickly, as you can see, the Marder on my right-hand side just now got to the top of the hill before I could. That's fine. But when it comes to being more nimble and circling tanks being more effective as a light tank hiding and hiding off in the distance, I think the BMP-2 does a better job of that. Not just because of its vehicle statistics, but because its profile is smaller. That's why the concealment on the Marder is worse. The concealment is tied to the height of the vehicle, and the Marder is a taller tank. So that's why the concealment is worse. And that means that the BMP-2 is a better light tank. And that's why I mentioned earlier that, yes, the Marder has more hit points. But if you're a bigger target, that means that you're easier to hit. It means that it's so much easier for someone, your aim reticle doesn't need to be as tight as, or as fully aimed as other shots, because the Marder will fill more of your aim circle. So from a scout point of view, I think the BMP-2 definitely wins, and that Marder was sitting on top of a hill. I don't recommend anybody do that. That's not good for your health, as I've just demonstrated there. So, playstyle. The winner of the scout competition goes to the BMP-2, hands down. And as you can see in this game, I am being a lot more cautious in the BMP-2 than I would in the Marder. I might first approach to a match when the game first starts, I would take the same line in both of them, but depending on what happens from 30 seconds in, I would then switch up my gameplay. And from memory, the start of this game, I had a lot of aggressive Marders going in that in F3 on the minimap right now. There were a lot of Marders going in aggressively, because that is typically what you can do with the Marder. You can be aggressive with it, and you can pull in those insane damage numbers, and that's what those guys did. But I believe there are 3 Marders that are dead on my team, and I am the remaining scout. Oh, me and one other, I don't know what it is, but teaching that armadillo a lesson. So there you have it. You can be aggressive with a Marder, and sometimes you need to be aggressive, but in those tight situations, in those situations where you've lost your speed because you've slowed down and you need to get out quickly, the Marder doesn't have that on-the-spot nimble maneuverability. And at close range, the Marder is quite limited in the sense that the gun depression on the launcher sometimes means you can't aim down low enough to hit the tank that's right in front of you. So it's a very unique playstyle in the Marder. It is not the same as the BMP-2, which can be played at close and long range. It can be played aggressively, but not always. I think the Marder can get away with being more aggressive because the gun at close range, the autocannon, is more effective with the extra penetration and the higher alpha per shot. So you can do damage a lot more quickly. But the BMP-2 is a lot more, it's more patient in its playstyle. And I think what we're seeing in the game now is we're seeing an introduction of what I want to call traditional scout tanks and light assault vehicles. That's how I want to put it, because a scout will be nimble on the spot. It's not got great armor. It's quick, and its role is to pull in the spotting assist. That's what the BMP-2 does. The Marder can do that, but it's not as good as the BMP-2 in that role. What the Marder can do is it can get into a situation, it can put an ATGM out, it can fire off its 75 rounds in the autocannon, and it can do an incredible amount of damage in that time, but then it needs to nip off to reload. So in that sense, it's almost like a French medium, French light playstyle. It's different. It is very different. So there we go, 4,472 damage in the BMP-2, and there we go, 1,500 assist. Not brilliant assist, I'll be honest, but that's a heck of a lot more assist than I had in the previous game in the Marder 1A1. Holding on to my 3 mark there. So there you go. Which is better, the BMP-2 or the Marder 1A1? I don't think either one is better. I think they both have their place in the game, and they are ever so slightly different, and the one that you choose will come down to your playstyle. Do you want to be more of a scout that holds back and farms the spotting assist, or do you want to be the guy that is a bit more aggressive, goes into a situation, takes advantage of a situation, goes in, does the damage, and then has to nip off and reload? Up to you. It really comes down to playstyle. And there you go. That is my answer. Which one is better? Then neither one. It comes down to what you think is best as an individual player. So that is all I have for this one, guys. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave it a like. If not, a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next one.